What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the first entry in what is supposed to be a series about the story of Divinity 2. Now, a couple of preamble notes just real quick. Divinity 2 is technically the latest in the Divinity game series timeline. The events of Divinity 2 are the most current. Now, that said, with the game's original Sin story arc that they're currently working on, and with Divinity Fallen Heroes announced, we can't really say when this story is going to be picked up, but again, in terms of events, this is the most current information. So, if you're confused about Divinity's series timeline, which is incredibly easy to be, I recommend you check out the Divinity series timeline video on my channel, which should clear up some things and tell you when all of the games take place. There are some plot holes, just straight up, because there are literally two canon sources that say something entirely different. So there are a few plot holes here and there, but other than that, it's pretty accurate. Jumping right into it, in Divinity 2, you play as a Dragon Knight. But before you're a Dragon Knight, you start out as a Dragon Slayer, which is a bit on the opposite end of the spectrum. So, you start by creating your character in a... So, I hate this character creator. I'm just going to level with you guys. It's so limiting. It's almost like, why is it even here? Like, I would almost have just rather a specific protagonist than deal with, like, the worst character creator I've ever had. As much as I enjoy the Divinity series games, plenty of them have their flaws, and I think it's okay to call them out, as you probably just noticed. So, after you make your character, there's some cutscenes, and then you start out in Farglow. Now, your purpose in Farglow is to finish your Slayer initiation. You have been in training as a Dragon Slayer for quite a long time, roughly the last 10 years or so, and today is the day of your initiation where you graduate to become a full-blown Dragon Slayer. Now, after a short conversation with Commander Rhodes, who is like the Dragon Slayer elite, you're basically going to go to this town, you're going to talk to a few people who are going to explain some things previously not told to you, and then you can be on your way. So after getting stopped at the gate by a guy who tells you basically the same thing, but also tells you very specifically to go talk to Morgana by the shrine, which is up a little path. So when you get to Morgana, she explains the Slayer ritual. Now, the Slayer ritual, and the means by which Dragon Slayers are honestly able to kill dragons, is that there is a ritual that gives an individual all of a dragon's memories. Now, this is what actually gives you the ability to fight a dragon and, potentially win. Morgana performs this ritual after explaining to you that while the ritual is powerful, it also tends to rob the recipient of their actual memories, because the ritual was intended to be used on a dragon's brain. Obviously, you're not a dragon, so all of your training up to this point has been to get you ready for this ritual, and that once it's performed, you will be able to see the dead, which is just a cool side effect. Your eyes will turn silver, and you'll have all the memories of dragons and all of their weaknesses and things like that. So it's a pretty cool ritual overall. But again, you will actually lose all of your memories, other than the very basic, muscle memory type stuff. So it comes with a pretty big cost, which is why there aren't a lot of Dragon Slayers around. Now from here, she tells you to go talk to Isabel. So you cannot miss Isabel on your way back into Farglow from the shrine. It's like she blocks your path. There's pretty much no way actually to get around her. There's actually no way to get around her, and she's supposed to also teach you something special. So she explains that when Dragon Slayers were raiding a Dragon Knights, which is something I'll get to here in just a second, base, that they found a spell that dragons use to read people's minds, which is another reason the Dragon Slayer ritual is important. Because in addition to giving you all this memory and stuff, the ritual actually protects you from dragons' mind attacks. Because apparently, Dragon Knights have such a strong presence of will, and dragons in general, have such a strong presence of will that they can basically just dominate a person's mind just with their presence, which makes them pretty deadly to human beings in general. And the ritual is a form of protection against that, because otherwise there would be no fighting them, because the fight would be over before it started. So from there, the last thing you have to do before you can leave Farglow is you have to talk to a combat veteran, and they will basically give you a small spell that will give you some memories of one of the basic combat disciplines, which, as you might imagine, is of course warrior, ranger, or mage in this particular case. talk to one of them, they'll give you the spell, you'll get some basic abilities for that archetype, and you can move on. And Commander Road explains that this is the point where they would normally take you back to the Dragon Slayer's fortress of sorts and finish your initiation, because there's a second part of it, which is a ritual to help you handle all of the memories from the dragon ritual that you just received. Otherwise, your mind will snap and you'll go crazy. However, there have been reports of a dragon sighting in the Broken Valley area. And because it's a dragon and they're dragon slayers, that takes precedence over you potentially losing your mind. All of you pack up and go to Broken Valley, where Commander Road has the other dragon slayers start fanning out to search for the dragon, and she herself goes to talk to the captain of the guard in the nearby village, and she sends you to go talk to villagers of said town to try to find out where the dragon has been seen at. Now, you can pretty much just ask around town here. You need to have heard about the dragon 3 times, and then go talk to Commander Road. She is, of course, where she said she would be, talking to the captain of the guard in the guard's barracks. Now, when you talk to her, she appreciates your information, and you have a small outburst because of the dragon ritual not being completed. This is where Commander Road sends you to go fight an undead, which is apparently part of the process to finish the ritual that you'd started. So you head off to the chapel's crypt to do exactly that, and you fight an undead, exactly as it says. However, it actually turns out that this undead is a dragon slayer of old, and for defeating his ghostly form, he gives you his sword. Now, when you exit the crypt, you meet up with Commander Road, who's like, "Oh my god, you met the ghost of this super awesome dragon slayer guy. However, your initiation isn't finished, so I'm gonna need that sword because we gotta go kill this dragon." And doesn't invite you to help kill the dragon because, with your initiation not actually complete, facing the dragon would leave you open to its mental attacks and you would be done for. In blatant disregard for an obvious warning, we go follow Commander Road and the other dragon slayers to go find this dragon. Now, when we get to the spot that the quest marker leads us to, and really the only path out of the area, we bump into Talana, injured by the very sword you just got for Commander Road. So Talana was able to escape the assault of the other dragon slayers, but she is grievously wounded and she is about to die. So because you find her and you are not guarded against her mental attacks, she seizes the opportunity to give all of her power as a dragon knight to you, a dragon slayer, which is where the story really starts to take off. Now, Talana uses the opportunity to explain a few plot points, and I'm going to use the opportunity to also do that. So the difference between a dragon and a dragon knight, to the common people of Rivellon, the Divinity game's Earth, if you will, is unnoticeable. So what actually happened is that dragons were an old race of their own. For reasons unknown to people, they just decided they didn't want to hang out anymore. So they all seem to have just reclused themselves for an unexplained reason. And in doing so, rather than continue to go out into the world, the dragons, otherwise known as the Old Race, decided to go amongst the other races of Rivellon and hand-select people. Exactly what the dragons are looking for in a person is unclear. However, once they had selected someone and properly trained them, they granted power to these people that then became known as the Dragon Knights. However, over time, these Dragon Knights were even able to take on a draconic form themselves, just straight up become a dragon, and because of that, while Dragon Knights are factually not as strong as actual dragons are so rare and have just straight up not been seen in forever that Dragon Knights became interchangeable with the actual terms of dragons. So a Dragon Knight is just considered a dragon, really. So with that explanation out of the way, after you wake from Talana's dream showing you the devastation that is going to happen to the world, you are awoken by Damien, the Damned One, from the previous game, Beyond Divinity. I also have a series explaining that story as well if you want to catch up on it, but Damien the Damned One is the bad guy, as the Damned One title would probably tell you. So he wakes you up, basically explains that don't even think about trying to stop him, which seems like a weird thing for a villain to do rather than just kill you outright, but we'll get to that later on in the series. So, after this conversation, you have an immediate follow-up conversation with Zandelor, who is another repeating character from the original Divine Divinity game. Technically, he has a small role in Beyond Divinity, but it's also not really him, so I don't think that really counts. However, Zandelor is a big central character of Divine Divinity, and in Divinity 2, he shows up, basically tells you where you need to go next, as well as alludes to something about the truth of Talana's motives, which is the Dragon Knight that just died and gave you all of her power. So Zandelor directs you to go see Lovis, a long-dead Dragon Knight. Remember, you can see ghosts now. And his tower is not too far away. So, the Broken Valley area that you are in was actually ruled by Dragon Knights, because as you might imagine, being able to have all this power as a person turned Dragon Knights into either great rulers or, basically tyrants. So, in days of old, they controlled quite a bit of territory. Now, Lovis is one such person who has long been gone. When you finally get to Lovis, which actually involves a small outside dungeon of sorts, kind of some puzzles and stuff, Lovis actually also explains some really cool plot points. So the setup to Divinity 2 is that Lucian the Divine has been murdered by a Dragon Knight. And because of this supposed betrayal of the Dragon Knights, who had agreed to help Lucian against Damien's forces because he had recently escaped Nemesis through the events of Beyond Divinity. Again, these Dragon Knights supposedly betrayed Lucian the Divine and murdered him by stabbing him in the back. However, Lovis explains to you that this just straight up isn't true, that the Damned One, Damien, actually mind-controlled the Dragon Knight, because he's the Damned One, and was able to use that influence to basically stage an assassination on Lucian the Divine. Because of this, it also explains what Talana was referring to earlier in the conversation, that things aren't always what they appear, and that the Dragon Slayers hunting down the Dragon Knights is just wrong, and basically it's founded on this mistruth that has been perpetuated, and it's why Zandelor, a big friend of Lucian the Divine, has actually never prosecuted the Dragon Knights himself, which also caused Zandelor to fall out of favor a little bit. And lastly, and for the wrap-up of this particular part, Lovis sends us to the fortress of his old Dragon Knight master. So all Dragon Knights are powerful, but they also all ultimately answer to someone, right? So most Dragon Knights in the area answered to like a supreme Dragon Knight known as Maxos. So Maxos is the guy who is going to give us the ability to turn into a dragon. Not himself personally, because Maxos, like everyone else, is long dead, but he did leave the means and trials for you to pass, for anyone to pass really. That could then of course grant you your dragon form, because just being a Dragon Knight doesn't automatically mean you get to turn into a dragon. So Lovis sends you off to find Maxos, which will give you your dragon power, which is basically necessary to continue onward as a Dragon Knight. Dragon Slayer turned Dragon Knight, that is, even. So with that, guys, that is going to wrap up part 1. So just some quick notes on this. I like the game, I like the setup, but in my opinion, this first little act of the game just blitzes through so much story that if this is the first game you're playing, it's not paced to the point where you're not going to be able to keep up. It's just paced so fast. It's like they just crammed all this story into one part, and it's comprehensible. I'll give them that. It just seems like it's moving so quickly. There you go, guys. That is part 1. Hopefully I will have part 2 up before too long, in which we will explore Maxos' temple and go through some more story stuff we got to do. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But more than anything, thank you for watching and have a great day. What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you part 2 of our Divinity 2 story videos. So this part actually took me a long time to get together because there was a ton of footage I had to get. We actually cover a lot of ground in this one, regardless of however long this actually winds up being. In terms of actual gameplay, you're covering a lot of ground because I skipped pretty much all the side quests, and there's an absolute ton of them going on in between the actual story bits that I'm showing you in this part of the video. So it's actually a pretty lengthy amount of game time here. With that out of the way, the last bit that we left off on in part 1 was getting the information from Lovis about where we need to go, and basically just learning about what we need to do to become a full Dragon Knight, and moving on from there. So, the start of this part, we arrive at Maxos' shrine, which is where Lovis told us to go. Maxos is, of course, the kind of like a Captain Dragon Knight. He didn't actually die like all the other ones seem to have. Maxos just disappeared altogether, so it's very strange. Now, upon arriving at the shrine, we're pretty much immediately confronted by our old Commander Rode, who immediately recognizes that you've been granted the power of the dragon and basically tells your old friends to kill you because she's a nice lady. And then she walks off, apparently just leaving you to your fate, which seems highly irresponsible. However, you kill your old friends, apparently, which I guess was supposed to be meaningful, but I don't feel like the game handled it super well, but like it's an older game, so what do you expect, I guess? Upon entering Maxos' shrine, Zandalor pops up and we speak to him again. This conversation seems mostly pointless. You basically just tell him what Lovis said and that's it. But from there, moving through the shrine, it's a bit of a dungeon crawl, so all you really have to do here is a few trials. Apparently Maxos set these up for future Dragon Knights. They're just trials that all of them have to pass. There is a trial that you walk into a room and everything is gold. You have to find the item you can pick up that isn't actually gold, which is a pumpkin for some weird reason. And then there is a memory puzzle, I guess would be the best way to describe it. You walk into a room and it's divided into two halves, and the two halves are identical, and you have to spot the one difference by picking up the item. Spoiler, it's a cup on the left side. And then there is a jump puzzle that's apparently supposed to like test your reflexes, but just requires you to jump around a bunch of platforms and pull some switches. Now from here, we actually get to move farther down into the shrine because completing those 3 challenges opens up a portal that leads down. So once we get farther into the shrine, we actually have to kill a bunch of Black Ring people, which we've seen them before. Up to this point in the game, we have seen Black Ring members before, so that's not like a huge surprise, but how they got in here is curious, to say the least. So with that in mind, we kill them. We talk to all the ghosts, because again, our dragon powers let us see ghosts. And if you talk to the head librarian guy, he kind of tells you what's going on here. Your goal in this part of the actual shrine is to kill a guy named Amdusius. I have no idea how to pronounce this dude's name, but he is a failed acolyte of Maxos. He was given the Dragon Knight power, but he was never actually able to ascend and properly transform into a dragon like his peers because he failed whatever test Maxos gave him. And because of that, Amdusius went to extraordinary alternative lengths to turn himself into a dragon. And he is... you have to kill him because he's the next trial, but he's also guarding Lovis's soul stone, which if you get that, you can choose what to do with it and decide to let Lovis pass on or whatever else. Right now, we need to basically find a way to fight Amdusius because, he's a dragon and he's flying around this big room and you can't fight him right now, really. So by talking to the head librarian, you can learn about a book that is supposedly in the library, well, not the library per se, but in the area somewhere. He kind of tells you what's going on. So if you go to the librarian quarters, I guess would be the best way to put it, you can find some keys in some secret areas, and you can find the first part of a book called the Orbis Assessio, something like that. I'm terrible with pronunciations if you haven't noticed that by any of the videos I actually make. Once you have that book, all you have to do is bring it back to the head librarian. He actually trades it to you for the second part, which is important because the second part of this book is actually what tells you how to transform Amdusius back from his dragon form, which involves you just gathering some reagents from the general area, including some dragon scales from Amdusius's room itself. So you have to run in there while he's a dragon, grab the scales, and then run back out before he shoots you to death from the sky. Once we have all the reagents, we can mix the potion or the spell or whatever it is, I guess. Speak that spell when you get back to Amdusius's room once you've done it, and he turns back into his human form, making him fightable, which means you can kill him. So after you kill him, you can pick up Lovis's soul stone that I mentioned earlier, and then you can kind of decide whatever you want to do with it from there. But more importantly, Amdusius is dead, which means our final trial is passed, which means the barrier out of Maxos' shrine is finally open. Now, it is important to note that just because we passed these trials doesn't mean that we are actually getting to turn into a dragon just yet. Typically speaking, apparently, this would have been where Maxos would have normally granted you the powers to transform or whatever, but Maxos is gone. So what you have to do instead is go find Maxos' Dragonstone, which is apparently what he used to grant this power to people. The exit to Maxos' shrine leads to an island called Sentinel Island, because apparently we've traveled underground pretty far to this point because we were in the valley and now we're off the coast somehow. Exiting Maxos' shrine again leads us to what is known as Sentinel Island. Now once we walk on to Sentinel Island, we are immediately greeted by the island, apparently. So it chooses a kind of earthen Spriggan type avatar to speak to us, but essentially this avatar is, the actual island itself. Now the island tells us quite a bit, actually. This is an important conversation for the game. So a couple of things, but what it actually explains that we need to do to continue the story, first and foremost, is that you're the Dragon Knight, and it is prophesied that you retake what is known as the Battle Tower, which is on Sentinel Island, that was built by Maxos, apparently, and it was his seat of power for a long time before he disappeared. So in order to do that, you need to do a couple of things. One, if you're playing the game yourself, you would have heard mention of a guy named Lakin up to this point, because while you're in Maxos' shrine, you get confronted by a woman named Sasan, or, the facsimile of someone named Sasan. She's actually like a stitched together flesh golem in the image of a woman that was apparently Lakin's ex-lover. She tells you about Lakin. Lakin is apparently this necromancer who has taken over the battle tower and is doing horrendous necromancer stuff up there. And the island tells you that it is prophesied that you've come to take the battle tower back from him. Now the battle tower, knowing this, or the island I should say, knowing that you're coming, has brought travelers from around to the island to help you pick who's going to serve you once you take the tower. Now, in order to actually get into the battle tower, two things need to happen. First, we need to deal with the people that the island has brought to the island. Once you get the tower, you get 4 servants: a necromancer, a trainer, an enchanter, and a craftsman, something like that. The island has brought 2 potential candidates for each of these jobs to the island. So what you have to do is you have to go meet all of them, and once you've met all of them, you'll find these necromancer totems around the island. There's one for each job. So once you have met the candidates, you can actually go to these necromancer totems and choose which one you want, and then the other one promptly dies, which the avatar explains. That's exactly how it works. It's intended. There's a couple ways you can resolve these quests. Like, how you resolve them and who you choose does not matter at all. It will change a couple of things, like some quests later on, but like the outcome of those quests, like the rewards from them, is ultimately the same. It just changes the context a little bit. For each of these job roles, all you have to do is pick one. Now, if you don't like choosing who lives and who dies, you can do a couple of side quests for these people that will help you decide. Like for the enchanters, you can have them both enchant you an item, and then that proves who's the better enchanter or whatever, and then you can still choose who you want. Now, there are 2 of them that will just result in the death of one of them altogether without you having to choose. The trainer job role, there are 2 people on the island for it, and one of them will suggest a fight to the death to prove who's the better trainer, and then obviously your trainer is the one who lives. The necromancer, one of them can be convinced to poison the other one, and then ta-da, you've done that. Now, alternatively, like I mentioned, once you have met both of them, you can just straight up go to the necromancer totem, tell it this is the person you want, and the other one is promptly murdered by the island. Now, the catch to this is, I say the catch, but the weird thing about this is the island alludes to if you refuse to choose, it'll choose for you, but I've never gotten that to trigger in any way. There's no way to be like, I don't know, pick one. So I don't know if that's just like a weird thing they never resolved or what exactly, but you do ultimately have to make this decision yourself if you want to continue the story. Once you have all 4 of those positions filled for your future tower, you have to do one other thing, because the entrance to the battle tower is actually blocked off by some sort of magical barrier. Now, you have to do some digging around, because best I can tell, there's nothing that actually points you to this. You just kind of have to stumble into it when looking around the island. There is a grave on part of the island, and there's an unnatural storm preventing these candles from being lit around this grave. Now, once we find this grave, and we'll kind of know what we're looking for from finding it, and you'll probably find it first, you will, across the island, find a guy being attacked by these things called dragon elves. I'll get to the dragon elves in just a second because it's crazy lore stuff. Once you help this guy being attacked by the dragon elves, he will give you a book. If you read the book, you find out that it is actually a book about magical storms. If you bring it back to the grave, you can use the book there to dissipate the storm, which then lets you light the candles, which then lets you talk to the ghost of Sasan, the crazy stitched together lady we saw earlier. So Sasan explains a few things. Lakin, in order to gain access to the battle tower, murdered Sasan, his lover, and used her blood to get into the tower. Apparently that was like some weird requirement. Because he missed her, apparently stitched together a duplicate with spare parts. So obviously the dead Sasan is like, I'm pretty pissed about this. And she gives you a means to resurrect her. She tells you if you can go find her old ring from Lakin's like little laboratory that he used before he took over the tower, then you should be able to resurrect her with that ring. And she tells you the password to the door and sends you on your way. So, real quick, before we go any farther with that, let me explain the Dragon Elves, because the Dragon Elves are crazy. Sentinel Island is apparently a very important place because the magic that the island itself uses, the island that's speaking to you, is actually magic tied to creation itself. That draws in the dragons, which is why it is notoriously a home to dragon power, really. And because of this, the conversation that we had with the island earlier alludes to the fact that the magic of dragons, like true dragons, not dragon knights, is actually that of creation itself. And the dragons, needing strong, resolute servants, decided to use some of that magic to magically twist elves, what they considered one of the superior races, into versions of themselves. So dragons created this weird race called the Dragon Elves that slowly went crazy because it didn't work out. Who would have thought? And now you have these crazy dragon elf things. And here's the thing. I've never seen these guys anywhere else in any part of any of the games. This is just a weird lore enemy that you fight just here on this island. So that's a thing. Dragon elves are a thing. I kind of hope they use them at some point in the future. And you can actually talk to a dragon elf who kind of gives you some background lore and helps you do a side quest on the island. So, moving on though. After we do all of this, we can go to the laboratory that Sasan mentioned. We can grab her old ring out of it. It's pretty easy. We are immediately then confronted by the stitched up together Sasan, who tries to kill us again before teleporting away. After you clear out that and bring the ring back to the ghost Sasan, she will be resurrected and will offer to not tear down the magical barrier in front of the battle tower, but basically to use the fact that she's alive and helping you to taunt Lakin into taking the barrier down himself to confront you. So if you follow her, it works out as planned. One thing I have to mention before we get into the tower portion of this video. This is where you need to complete all of the side quests in Broken Valley and the Sentinel Island area that you have not done yet. Because, basically, Damien, the Damned One, doesn't like the fact that you've been taking over this tower. Or at least trying to. So he's been ramping up his forces and attacks on Broken Valley. And basically, Talana in your head tells you in just a minute that because of your attempts to take this battle tower, that basically once you do, Damien's going to destroy the whole area. So this is pretty much your last chance to do the side quests that need to be done for those two areas. And I especially recommend you do the side quests for the Sentinel Island area, because that area is actually the first area that you will find some of the in-game set pieces. So when it comes to armor and stuff, the set pieces are very important. There are 3 in-game sets, like the Aleroth War Mage, the Hunter, and the Scorpion set. And the first few pieces you're going to find of these items is actually on Sentinel Island. So it's really important that you actually do the side quest there and find those items, because the area around the tower will also be destroyed after you take the tower, and you won't be able to actually get on the ground outside. So it's important you do this stuff now. Moving on. So we're inside the tower. What do we do? So first of all, what we actually do is fight our way up a little path that was blocked by the magical barrier. We kill the bandits that have been working for Lakin, bringing him corpses. We sneak into their barracks where the stitched together Sasan confronts us once again. And again, upon killing her forces, we can continue on. She, however, caves in the path we needed to travel down. So at this point, through either exploring the area or talking to a captured prisoner, I guess, in one of the cells nearby, you can find out that there's a secret room somewhere around you. And once you find it, you can go down that path and actually find some explosives you can use to blow up the cleared rubble and clear the rubble that Sasan, the stitched together Sasan, just made. So once you do that, you can travel down the path and get into the tower proper. So once you get to that point, Sasan stops you again, the regular Sasan that is, tells you basically what you need to do. Basically that she doesn't want to confront Lakin directly, but that Lakin actually soul forged himself to a demon, and that's how he's been living for centuries on end. And what she wants to do is actually summon this demon, kill it, thus killing Lakin through the soul forge magic. So you're a little skeptical of this, but you go along with it anyway, which is fine. But once you enter the tower, you actually have to run through another small dungeon that basically involves getting some keys from some abomination masters that you have to kill on different floors of the tower, and then using those to find the contract that actually has the demon's name that Lakin soulforged himself to, so that you can summon it and try to kill it. Now this demon's name is Razakel, and once you know that as a character, you can then continue on to the highest floor of the tower that you can actually go to at the moment. Talk to Sasan, regular Sasan, who is waiting for you. And she's like, all right, you got the name. Let's carry on with this business. So at this point, you can continue down the path, come into a room with a summoning circle where the stitched together Sasan stops you for the final time, taunts you some more, and then attacks you. And then you can finally murder some abominations as well as the stitched together Sasan herself. And then at this point, you're actually free to summon the demon Razakel. You summon him, he's like, yeah, so I'm a demon. I'm just going to try to kill you guys. I feel like that was obvious. You have a fight with Razakel, but when you actually go to kill him, he runs away like the coward he is, but he does open the way to Lakin. So now instead of having to fight just Lakin, you have to fight Razakel and Lakin together because plans like to backfire. So continuing down the path that Razakel just opened, you can take an elevator up to Lakin, who basically is like, this tower is rightfully mine because I'm a necromancer who's done terrible necromancer things here for a long, long time. And you're like, no thanks. And then he, regardless of your conversation options, attacks you as expected. Now there are a couple ways to resolve this fight. He sends a bunch of abominations at you, which is fine. You can kill those guys and then kill like Razakel or Lakin. But if you remember correctly, Razakel and Lakin are soul forged together. So if one of them dies, both of them die. So Razakel charges you directly in melee combat, so it's actually sometimes better to just fight off Razakel in like a corner of this room, thus causing Lakin to die and stop hurling magic at you. That's probably the easiest way to do this fight. But regardless, once they're dead, Damien immediately attacks, basically. So if you walk up the stairs, it triggers a small cutscene where Zandalor and Damien talk. Damien is like, I'll destroy this whole tower and the whole world because my dad killed my lover, as we've been over several times. Damien attacks the tower, which is fine. You actually have to rush off, grab the dragon stone that I previously mentioned, which is our whole reason for being in the tower, which helps you turn into a dragon. And turning into a dragon, for the first time, you get to defend your tower against Damien's armada. Now, what this actually translates to in gameplay terms is you fighting as a dragon with your fire breath, destroying artillery towers and things on these floating islands that have just attacked your tower. Now, once you get this done, a short cutscene plays where it shows Damien destroying the Broken Valley and the Sentinel Island and Broken Valley areas being turned into toxic air areas, basically. Now, as a dragon, you can fly above Sentinel Island and still, dominate your island, but the explorable ground area is no longer there. Now, for Broken Valley, it's a complete change. Again, the ground area is not explorable, and there are Damien's armadas everywhere, so that's a thing. However, having successfully defended your tower, you can go back to your tower where a few things happen. Sasan explains that, the tower is yours now. Feel free to do with it what you will. your 4 people that you chose while you're on the ground on the island have moved in and have assumed their roles as your alchemist, enchanter, necromancer, and trainer and all that. And then, more importantly, we can go down into Maxos' old living quarters, now your living quarters, because this is your tower now, and you can find the spell that Maxos used to enter the Hall of Echoes. Now, this is what we've actually been searching for, because as you may or may not remember at this point, because there's been a ton going on, our actual main mission is to get into the Hall of Echoes, which is basically the afterlife, so we can resurrect Yagurna, Damien's fallen lover, thus, by using the magic of the Reverse Soul Forge, by bringing Yagurna back to life, that killing Damien. So, Maxos apparently had a spell to enter the Hall of Echoes, which is in his living quarters. It explains how to reveal the entrance to the Hall of Echoes. Now, at this point, the game shifts to finding everything you need for this spell to get into the Hall of Echoes. Now, we're going to be exploring a new area called the Orbis Fjords, which makes better use of our newly found dragon form, and searching out the pieces of the spell that we need to enter the Hall of Echoes, or the reagents. So, in our next episode, we will be exploring some of that. So, that is part 2 of Divinity 2's story. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed it, found it really cool and interesting, all that jazz. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, do all the typical YouTube things. Consider joining the channel as a member. It costs you $1. You get some perks. I get $1. Helps the channel grow, yada, yada, yada. Thank you so much for watching, honestly. I really appreciate any love anybody gives any of these videos, because I love making them and talking about Divinity lore especially. So if you happen to watch it all the way to the end, thank you so much, seriously, and have a fantastic day. What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you part 3 in our story of Divinity 2. So, last episode, we wrested the battle tower from the hands of Laken the Necromancer and awakened our dragon powers. So, in this episode, starting things off right where we left off, really. After defeating Laken and finding the spell to find the Hall of Echoes in Maxos' old bedroom, we have everything we need to move on. So Zandalore as well as Talana in our head inform us that what we need to do from here is gather the rest of the components for the spell to reach the Hall of Echoes to continue our mission to try to resurrect Yagurna, thus killing Damien. Now, in the first part of the game, we arrive in Broken Valley and we can explore and kind of do quests and everything in the Broken Valley area on foot. In the second part here, we come to an area called the Orbis Fjords, and this is more tailored around your dragon form. It's a lot of water areas that you have to fly around, a lot of little islands. It's basically tailored around your dragon form that you just recently received. However, it still functions in pretty much the same way. There's a central quest area as well as a bunch of quests to be found that you can do in and around the place. The main difference here is that instead of there being a linear narrative for the main story, it's broken up into 3 parts. So at this point, we just need to gather the rest of the things that we need to reach the Hall of Echoes, which are 3 specific things. And we can do them in any order at any time. However, they are level-based, like there are leveled bosses that are in each area, so it can be a little difficult if you try to go at it too soon, hence all the exploration you can do. But that said, nothing is actually stopping you from trying to do any of these things at any time. First things first, and we're just going to do this by the level requirement. I say requirement very loosely, but the general level of the things around you. So the first thing we do is we talk to a dragon, because only a true dragon can actually manifest a portal to the Hall of Echoes. You still need a spell to reveal it, but it takes a true dragon to actually even make that portal in the first place. There is a primordial cave in the Orbis Fjords, which is actually where we need to go. Now, in order to actually get into the deeper part of the cave, we need to do a small quest for 3 dragon statues that are in our way. So 3 dragon statues guard a door. They each ask you for a seed from an old tree. You go find these trees in the fjord. They each have you do a small task that usually involves killing something that's bothering them, and then bringing one of their seeds back to the corresponding statue, which then opens the door. And then after that, we can go through there, solve a couple of annoying puzzles, And then we can talk to none other than the Patriarch from Divine Divinity. Now, this is an awesome conversation, especially from a lore perspective. It actually answers quite a few things. One, it does a much better job of explaining who the Patriarch is actually supposed to be than Divine Divinity did. Now, in Divine Divinity, all we really got on the Patriarch is that he's a very old dragon. That was basically it. However, in this, we find out that he is one of the oldest dragons, hence why he's called the Patriarch in the first place. But in addition to that, he is very close to creation itself. So even among dragons, he's pretty highly respected. Through this conversation, you can learn that the reason everyone calls him the Patriarch is that because his name is literally a piece of creation itself, and that if people speak his true name, it will spawn new things into existence. So he goes by the Patriarch instead. Now you can, again, have this really cool conversation where he kind of makes light of the whole situation with Damien, remarking that while Damien is a big deal to mankind in the grand cosmos, he is ultimately insignificant. Which I guess that's what you'd expect from an impossibly old dragon. He also comments on your status as a ex-dragon slayer, and basically talks about how, again, while insignificant to him, the fact that the dragon slayers hate everything draconic makes him hate them. But ultimately, us being a Dragon Knight, the last of our kind, he agrees to create the portal that we need. He creates it under one of the trees that we just recently did a quest for. Now, after this exchange, we are once again attacked by Damien, who sends more goons after us. We kill him, and we move on. Now, for the next item on our list, we actually need to go to Aleroth City, which, again, you might actually remember from Divine Divinity. Aleroth was the healer town in Divine Divinity. Now, what we actually need to do in Aleroth is pretty straightforward. We need to meet up with Zandelor and help him gather the shield that will protect us from the Hall of Echoes magic from just killing us outright. Aleroth City is actually pretty small. You go to the hub area in the Orbis Fjords, and you take a Zeppelin to the city. When you get to the city, you find out that it's having some troubles. There's a short interaction with Commander Road, who you may remember from earlier. Commander Road, however, trying to attack you, the person who has actually done a lot of good in the realm recently, gets Commander Road arrested, and they send you on your way, which I always thought was kind of funny. Now, that said, you go through the small linear area that is Aleroth City at this point. So Aleroth City is very small at this particular point in the game. You can't do any real exploration. It's just like a short path up a road, and then you're at where you need to be, pretty much. So we meet up with Zandelor in this old ministry, and basically we help him close some hell portals that him taking the shield caused. And as soon as you're done with that, he gives you the shield and you can move on. There's really nothing to it. It's a bit annoying to try to close the rifts, however, because Zandelor does this timed channeled spell that actually literally has a timer. And if enemies hit him while he's doing this, it resets the timer completely. And on higher difficulties, this is ridiculous. It takes forever because he keeps getting reset because mobs will just run straight for him. And if you can't do anything about him fast enough, it just resets the timer. So it can be really, really annoying. But either way, once you get it done, there you go. You have the shield. You can move on. And that brings us to our very last thing. This is actually something I'm not a huge fan of about this game. And it's not even the game specifically. It's just how contrived this last little bit of questing is. So in addition to Maxos' spell to reveal the doorway to the Hall of Echoes, and the Patriarch having to make the doorway to the Hall of Echoes, we actually still need a sigil to unlock this portal/gateway to the Hall of Echoes. So the last thing we need is a sigil that has been told to us is in the possession of a demon named Baal. I guess, I don't know, I don't even pretend to try to know how to pronounce some of this stuff. But either way, we got to kill this demon, who I'm just going to call Baal for the time's sake. Now, we do this by actually going back to the Broken Valley. However, the Broken Valley is a toxic wasteland now, so we have to use our dragon form to fly above the fumes to keep from dying. Now, in our dragon form, we actually have to do a bit of digging around. As far as I know, there's nothing in the game that actually tells you where to get the key to the mines. Now, it is told to us by several characters that Baal is in these mines. However, if you actually go to the mines first, they're locked and you have to find the key. Now, if you do some digging around yourself, you'll eventually find it. It's not impossible. However, as far as I know, there's nothing that actually tells you where this key is. But a little northwest of the mines in the Broken Valley, there's actually a tower you can go to where the foreman of the mines actually was chased off to and is kind of being trapped by Black Ring people. And if you help him out, he'll give you the key to the mines. You can then enter the mines, of course. There's not really any puzzle here. You just have to run around a little bit, kill a lieutenant who drops the key to the door that then leads to Bale, and then you kill him, and that's it. He drops the sigil stone, and you're done. Now, once you've killed Bale, and he is the highest level requirement of all this stuff, by the way, once you've done that, you're clear to go to the Hall of Echoes. So at this point, you can wrap up anything else you need to do, but once you go to the Hall of Echoes, you can't really turn back at all. So don't go to the Hall of Echoes until you're ready to go. But once you've done everything you wanted to do and are ready to continue the game, head to the Hall of Echoes, which is actually, again, under a tree that we recently spoke to in order to gain access to the Patriarch to begin with. So once we fly down there, use Maxos' spell to reveal the door, use the sigil and the Patriarch's blessing to get through the door, we find ourselves in the Hall of Echoes. So, the Hall of Echoes. We actually speak to a guy named Sharon, at the Hall of Echoes. Now, Sharon is what is known as a dream eater, or a memory eater, if you will. So these guys, they inhabit the Hall of Echoes, and their job is to basically strip the memories away from souls so that they can be turned into Source. Now, at this point, we don't really know a lot about Source, and neither does the video game, because they haven't gotten that far into the original Sin plotline. But because of all that going on, we know now the Memory Eater's main purpose is simply to rip the memories away from these souls, and then the raw source of them goes on to the gods, as per the cycle that they intentionally made. In order to resurrect Yagurna, you have to fight your way through the Hall of Echoes to her memories. So the Hall of Echoes is all about memories. You see a lot of that going on here. You come to a small arena. You have to fight 3 boss fights again from previous bosses you've already defeated who had made their way to the Hall of Echoes because you killed them. They come back to fight you again. Honestly, super annoying fight. So there's 3 rounds. You fight a previous boss for each round. Now, the first and the third are fine. They're pretty much straightforward. It's not really a lot going on. You just hit them till they die. It's very much so like the actual boss fights that they were to begin with. The second one, however, is actually Sasan, the stitched together Sasan from episode 2. I mention this one specifically because, for some reason, in this particular redone version of this fight, she has some ridiculous attack that even on the lowest difficulty will take 3/4 of your life bar, and on normal difficulty and above seems to just outright kill you if you aren't already healing when it's cast. So it's very strange. I genuinely don't know how you're supposed to avoid this. The best way I could do it is attack her immediately when she shows up and try to keep her stunned, because it's the only way I could do it on the higher difficulties. But that said, that annoying little side note aside, so from here, once we get that boss fight taken care of, we just kind of continue along the path, and then we reach Yagurna's memories. Now, here's where things get fun. So we enter her memories in order to change one of them, the one where she died, thus bringing her back to life, because weird Hall of Echoes magic stuff. We come into the memory, and we see Lucian the Divine about to behead Yagurna, as is canon story. And then from here, we have to fight all of them because we intervene. So we have to fight all the paladins, we have to fight Zandalor, and we have to fight Lucian the Divine in this memory. This is the last fight of the game originally, and we'll get to what I mean by that in just a second. So once we defeat all of these guys, we resurrect Yagurna. However, and this is where it gets fun, spoiler warning, but you're watching this video about the story, so not really necessary, but nonetheless, this is where the fun stuff begins. So we resurrect Yagurna. Turns out the reverse soul forge between Yagurna and Damien that's supposed to kill Damien upon Yagurna's resurrection is complete nonsense. It's just some stuff Damien made up to compel people to go try to resurrect this woman for him. Moreover, it has actually not been Talana's voice in your head the entire game. It's been Yagurna's. I don't care for that part of the story, I'm not going to lie to you. I think it would make more sense for the voice to have been Talana this whole time, because she wouldn't have known about this plot either. and it just would have made more sense. But apparently this woman is supposed to be calling me from beyond the grave the whole game. I don't care for that, but that is nonetheless what the game tells you is happening, is that it was actually Yagurna's voice telling you where to go and how to do things, pretending to be Talana the entire time. Damien is like, ha ha ha, we tricked you, because he shows back up, of course. And then, rather than kill you, they decide to mock you eternally, and he transports you to the realm of Hypnerotomakia, which is a mouthful word of just saying like a frozen place in time. And this is where our Dragon Knight learns that the Divine is actually not dead at all, because you were just imprisoned on the same plane he has been imprisoned since his death, supposedly, at the hands of Dragon Knights. We get a big long speech from the Divine that's obviously playing right now, and then that's apparently it. We're supposedly stuck in Hypnerotomakia forever. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, this video doesn't say final part because this is only the ending of the original game. They released an expansion called The Flames of Vengeance that added on to the story, which you probably know about by now because it's very old. And the fact that, you're looking into the story of Divinity just by watching this video tells you you've probably done at least a little research. And The Flames of Vengeance is the continuation of the Dragon Knight saga after this point. However, the ending of the original game, Damien just completely won. You did all of his work for him. Lucian and yourself are trapped in the plane of Hypnerotomakia. Now, this is where this is going to end. So, this is the end of episode 3 right here. In episode 4, we will tackle the Flames of Vengeance story expansion, which will be fun, I'm sure. But that is it for this episode. So, if you guys liked it, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun YouTube jazz. Tell me how you feel about the story so far down in the comment section below. But thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.
Through war's crimson rivers. Time to wake up, my sleeping beauty.
My love, at last.
I battled tirelessly to release you from death's grip, and here you are, alive and free without my help. How?
I trained a pet. So acquiescent the little darling turned out to be. But I'll tell you all about that later. Is everything ready?
Oh yes, we are prepared. Come, my love. It is time for our conquest to begin.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the final part in our full story of Divinity 2. So, when we last left off in episode 3, we had successfully reached the Hall of Echoes, resurrected Yagurna, just to find out it was a trap, and that we were then subsequently trapped in Hypnerotomakia, which of course was the same plane that Lucian the Divine had been trapped on. And for all intents and purposes, Damien and Yagurna at this point had won, really. However, as we now know, because the Flames of Vengeance DLC has been out for many, many years, obviously, that was not the end of the story. So, what happens from here is we are visited in our prison by a mage named Berlin, I guess. And he explains that he can release us from our prison in exchange for us seeking to release him from his prison. See, in order to reach the Hall of Echoes, we removed a shield from Aleroth. This shield allowed Berlin to send a spirit form outside of his prison that he's been in for many years, thus contacting us. However, he still can't leave physically, and he makes a deal that if we go and free him after he frees us, that he will then help us free the Divine, and also save Aleroth from its imminent destruction. Because in our absence, Damien has brought the full might of his fortresses down on Aleroth, which is currently the capital of Rivellon. So, obviously we agree to this because we don't really have any choice and we're stuck in this place. Now, immediately upon being teleported to Aleroth City, we are greeted by the captain of the champions, Augustus. Augustus explains the current situation, that when Damien attacked, Zandalor was able to rally the mages of the city and start channeling a protective shield around the city. This takes every bit of his concentration. If he slips for a moment, the shield is going to fall. So Zandalor and several other mages are inside the main ministry of Aleroth doing nothing but channeling this spell. Now, your goal, and the goal of Captain Road, actually, which we'll get to in just a second, is to search for a way to get to Berlin's prison and actually free him. Now, Berlin is a mage from the Wizard Wars, which we learned from all of this dialogue, though a bit cryptically. He was trapped down there long ago, so he obviously picked the losing side in the Wizard Wars, the wizards that sided with Chaos, Damien, basically. And they were eventually defeated, and he was trapped all the way underneath Aleroth. What we have to spend our time in the city doing while Zandalor channels this spell is trying to find a way to reach Berlin, because in addition to freeing Lucian the Divine, he will also give us the means to stop Damien in his tracks and, prevent him from destroying the city when the shield goes down. Now, in addition to us, if you remember in part 3, I mentioned that Captain Road, the Dragon Slayer who actually raised us until we became a Dragon Knight, basically, had been put in prison for basically trying to kill you, actually, for being a Dragon Knight. But because of the impending crisis, she was deemed useful, and they went ahead and set her free. And she has already set off looking for a way to free Berlin herself. Captain Augustus tells us that last he heard, she had headed off towards the Prancing Seahorse, which is a gentleman's club in Aleroth, and that we can catch up with her there. So having no other leads, that's pretty much where you want to start after you do all of the picking up all the side quests and everything like you normally would in any game. We go to the Prancing Seahorse, and here we find out that a woman named Ursula has turned 3 guards of the Prancing Seahorse into talking vegetables. We learn that Captain Road has already been here and left, that this Ursula woman is in the archive, because the important thing that we learn about the Prancing Seahorse is that in addition to being a gentleman's club, it's actually also where official records of the city are kept. So if there's a way down into the recesses of the city, in theory it should be in this archive, or documentation of it should be somewhere in this archive. But like I said, this woman named Ursula has trapped herself in there magically, and the only way to open it is to press 3 levers that are guarded behind magic doors that are only openable with a password known by the 3 people who were turned into vegetables by Ursula, which is pretty much as convoluted as it sounds. So what we have to do is we have to go around and actually find these vegetables in and around the town, and you'll find them because they'll talk to you as soon as you get close to them. And you're not just searching blindly. If you do some asking around in the Prancing Seahorse, they'll actually tell you the last known location of these people. And once you've found all of them and gathered the passwords for their doors in the Prancing Seahorse, you can then go to the doors for their rooms, open them, hit the switch in all 3 of their rooms, and this will then turn off the shield. Because this is an RPG, and because this is actually the part of Divinity 2 I really enjoyed, they actually stepped up their game for Flames of Vengeance. And then, what I mean by that is that there's usually more than one way around a big puzzle or problem in Flames of Vengeance. So in addition to doing what I just mentioned, which was going around and getting the passwords and stuff, there is actually also a hidden note you can find that gives a numerical password to the gate as well. So next to the gate, there's a pedestal that will ask you for the numbers to get in. And if you actually know that, you can bypass all the nonsense I just mentioned with the talking vegetables. But either way, once we are in the room, we can talk to Ursula. We find out that basically the 3 guys who she turned into vegetables were misogynists who were very rude to her, and she turned them into vegetables because patriarchy. That's absolutely true. That is, it's a gentleman's club. That should pretty much tell you what's going on right there. Those guys were absolutely being jerks to Ursula. She turned them into vegetables. And at this point, we can decide whether or not to kill Ursula or let her go free, because those guys were jerks and she kind of just did the right thing anyway. However, she does take something from the archive, but it is of no mention or use, and nothing. It doesn't actually matter to what we're doing. So you can make that decision, and then ta-da, you are in the archive. So at this point, we are we are interrupted, rather, by a mage of the city, and he explains that Captain Rode found what she was looking for and moved on. So again, we already knew that she wasn't here anyway. But he explains furthermore that she ran off in search of the secret entrance to Berlin's catacombs, if you will, in the Champions Academy, which is across town in an undead-infested portion of the city. Now, there are supposed to be, and this mage is still explaining this to us, by the way, there are supposed to be 5 clues to opening the secret passage in the Champions Academy, and that Captain Rode disregarded all of that and just ran straight to the Champions Academy saying she would figure it out. Now, you can also do that. That is a viable option, but I'll get to that later. He insists that you search for the clues that will actually kind of help you open the vault, which we're obviously going to do because those clues make it much easier to do. Now, because of how long ago this passage was sealed in the Champions Academy, nobody knows who to talk to find these clues. Now, what you need to do, and basically what you're instructed to do, is to just do side quests around Aleroth until you find them. So this is the fun part of Flames of Vengeance. Flames of Vengeance probably by itself has more quests than the entire main part of the game. Now, a lot of them are pretty simple, but a lot of them are also fun and interesting, and they're all interwoven, so sometimes you have to finish unrelated side quests to gain access to an area, to finish more quests, to then eventually find these clues. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. But, so in order to find the 5 clues, you just have to do these side quests. And technically, you don't have to find these clues at all. Because there is no set way of telling which side quests will actually lead to clues, I just kind of have to jump straight into it and tell you which ones it winds up being. First of all, right when you get to Aleroth, you can find these handles on walls around town, and when you pull them, it lights up a rune along Lanalore Lane, which is part of Aleroth City. Now, each of those runes stands for something. It's a symbol. And then once we get that done, we can go talk to a dragon shrine at the end of these runes. Like, there's a little path of runes, and the dragon statue is not too much farther from them. And if you talk to it, it riddles you basically on what those runes actually mean. So, much like I mentioned, there's more than one way around these things. One, you can just guess, because after you've lit up a single rune, you can talk to the statue, and at that point you can just guess until you get it, or you can find more handles to figure out exactly what each rune means. Alternatively, if you just know the answer, you can put it in straight away and it'll open up. But that'll give you access to Maxos' shrine. So Maxos, of course, being like the head dragon knight back in the day. There is a small trial down here below, because trials are like Maxos' big thing. Past that, and you'll pick up one of the clues, which turns out to just be an item that has an inscription on it with a cryptic phrase that makes more sense later, but that's one of the clues. So that's probably the first one you'll find. The second one is at a place called Madam's Eve, which is basically a brothel, it would appear. So it turns out that all of the guests staying there were recently murdered. And because of this, you're requested to find the murderer. And this is actually one of the longer side quests, so I'll save you the hassle. After you do some investigating, you eventually find your way into a hidden cellar that is apparently in this brothel that no one knew about. And we run into none other than Zombie Jake. What you may or may not know is that Zombie Jake actually appears in Divinity Original Sin, which is a cool reference from this game into Original Sin, which is 2 games from now, which I thought was really neat. So once we put Zombie Jake down, he has another one of the clues, which is a ring, again with an inscription that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us right now. The third one is actually a guy named Sir Gula. So Sir Gula is actually a champion himself, which are like the city guards, basically. This is one of the side quests that opens up after you've done a couple other side quests, so you have to solve a murder a disappearance rather, of some healers. In doing so, you find out that Sergula has been requesting more and more food, and in order to satisfy that, a woman was straight up murdering people to give him more food. So naturally, you're like, well, we better go talk to Sergula, which is what you do. And it turns out that through a curse, he has been turned into a troll. He did not know that that woman was murdering people to get him the food he has been trying to eat. So in that way, he's not really guilty. But he does ask you to undo the curse that was laid upon him, and he believes it's from taking an artifact from a troll ruin that was an archaeological dig site in town. So he gives you the plate to go take back and put on the altar he took it from. So you do that, it undoes the curse, and then he gives you the next. The clue after that actually involves a champion of the guard. It turns out that one of the champions, the guards, has actually been worshipping demons, a guy named Hallowell. Interestingly enough, he's like one of the high-ranking leaders of the champions. So once we expose this, it helps to mind read for this one. That's probably the easiest way to get this quest, but there are a couple other ways. This is one of the ones that's more difficult and vague to actually start. You can eventually find out that Hallowell, who used to stay in a room in a tavern nearby, has frankly been causing weird noises and stuff to come from his room, and you can investigate that, and it turns out that Hallowell is actually a demon worshiper. You can go to his new room at another inn across town and confront him there, where he of course confesses to all this and then subsequently tries to murder you immediately, because of course he does. So you kill him, and then he actually has the fourth clue on his person. Now, the fifth clue, the fifth and final one, actually involves us solving what is going on with the undead that are rising in a section of the city. Now, in addition to tracking this down, I just want to mention that this quest actually leads us to what I believe is the first mention of an elf inhabiting Livewood. So, if you're familiar with Original Sin at all, something that is canonical lore is that elves can be turned into ancestor trees when they die, and it's basically a possessed tree, which is just a straight-up elf consciousness inside of a tree, which is awesome because you meet one of these trees during this part of the game, and as far as I know, this is like the first canonical mention of such a thing happening. So it's really just kind of cool to see like this vague idea turn into like a full-bloom lore type thing. So just a quick aside there. So once we fight our way through the undead portion of the city, we find out that it's actually being caused by a necromancer, nicely referred to as the engineer. So once we kill the engineer, it puts a stop to the undead in that part of the city, as well as gives us our final clue, as well as also gives us access to the Champions Academy, because the engineer is guarding the entrance to the Champions Academy, so you have to kill him regardless. So most of the clues are skippable. Like I mentioned, you can go straight to the Champions Academy. This guy is the one exception. You will always find at least this clue, simply because there's no way around it. You have to kill him to get into the Champions Academy. So there we go. We have all 5 clues. Now all we need to do now is go to the Champions Academy and unlock Berlin's prison. So this is the final dungeon of the game, if you will. So what we have to do is go into the Champions Academy, find a helmet of secrets, I believe it was called. And it's basically a helmet you put on that reveals hidden objects and like pedestals and stuff to jump on. And then once we have that, we can explore the Champions Academy with it, solve a few puzzles, which give us orbs. These orbs actually contain the names that are mentioned in some of the inscriptions of the clues we've been finding. So once we've got all of those clues found, we can then head to the section of the Champions Academy that is the entrance to Berlin's prison, and there are a bunch of glyphs all over the floor that represent a concept: mountain, death, the snake, that kind of thing. Now, the inscription will mention the name of the orb and then the name of the glyph. So you have to put one of them on like the death glyph on the ground and that kind of thing. So once the 5 orbs are in place on the appropriate glyph, the chamber opens up. So once again, if you already know which orb goes where, you can actually head straight to the academy, solve this puzzle, and go straight down. Upon entering Berlin's catacombs, we actually find Captain Rode, who has been petrified. She has been petrified by Belagar, the mage, the wizard, the guy. So if you've played, again, Original Sin, Belagar is mentioned actually pretty heavily in Divinity Original Sin. Now, what you may not know is that Belagar is one of the wizards still surviving to this day, and despite the fact that the dude's crazy and rhymes a lot, is still a very powerful wizard, because all wizards seem to be, and their lifespan seems infinite for some reason. Because if you remember, Original Sin takes place like 1300 years before this, and Belegar, Zandelor, and Arhu are all still alive. But that's neither here nor there. So we run into Belegar, who is actually apparently a sworn enemy of Berlin, which we already know up to this point because after you get every single clue, he pulls you into Hypnero Tomakia to try to put you back in prison because he does not want Berlin released. Now once we defeat Belegar right here, which we actually do by killing his minions over and over again, he retreats to catch his breath. And then we make our way through the catacombs, which is really just a short path down the catacombs, and we find Berlin's prison. Now at this point, Belegar shows up again and explains the danger of releasing Berlin. And at this point, Belegar finally offers an alternative to releasing him. So despite the fact that you've been trying to release Berlin, it's no secret that Berlin is a member of the Black Ring. It's just that you have to release him because there's no other alternative because he has an artifact that you need to stop all this. So Belegar provides you with an alternative. And what it really boils down to is a choice. You can side with Belegar and take his option, or you can go ahead and release Berlin. Now, what this actually translates to in gameplay terms is that you are about to come up on the last two encounters of the game, which are a flight through a bunch of fortresses in dragon form, and then lastly, the fight with Yagurna at the very end, because she's the last boss, which shouldn't be news to you, by the way, so it's not really a spoiler. What this choice amounts to is that if you side with Belegar, the assault on the fortresses in dragon form is more difficult because there will be more enemies. But Berlin will not survive to help Yagurna in the final battle. Whereas if you free Berlin, he gives you a stronger artifact than what Belegar does, which allows the dragon portion of flying through the fortresses to be easier. But then the fight with Yagurna is more difficult because Berlin is there to help her. So basically, you're choosing which encounter is going to be more difficult for you. That is what this choice actually is. But regardless, make your choice, and then you are teleported back to where Zandelor is in the Ministry. You talk to Augustus, tell him you're ready to go, that Zandelor can stop channeling because you have the artifact you need. You then talk to Zandelor, who expresses that this is very painful. But he's about to basically blow up the shield to take out the initial surrounding force, and then that'll allow you to fly through the leftover fortresses to assault the one that is believed to contain Damien. So that triggers the flight through the flying fortresses. What they do is they put the artifact you just recovered, either from Belegar or Berlin, on a zeppelin that then flies through to the keep Damien has been kept at. And your job is to protect this zeppelin as it flies through these fortresses to assault the final keep. Once you get that part done, you then fight Yagurna because they crashed the zeppelin into the keep after figuring out that Damien isn't there and that there's too many enemies for the zeppelin to make it. So they crash into it, and Yagurna teleports away to Hypnero Tomakia to avoid dying completely. This is where you finally fight Yagurna and quite possibly Berlin as well. Now, once this fight is done and you've won, that's the last fight of the game, obviously, so it ends right there. However, she does remind you that Damien is still out on the loose because he went off to become complete, is how she puts it. Now, this is interesting and very important because what you probably don't know is that Damien is actually just acting as a cocoon for chaos. So when he had that sliver put into him by that ritual, he's basically been a vessel for chaos to come through. And when Yagurna mentions that Damien has gone off to reach completion, is basically an allusion to the fact that maybe he's going to turn into like full-blown chaos god. Just a cool little aside, but regardless, the game ends right here after you free Lucian the Divine, and the game ends with you having set straight the story of what happened with the Dragon Knights, that they did not try to murder Lucian. The Divine returns to protect Rivellon, as well as Damien still being out there in the open. Now, this is the current state of affairs in Rivellon. This is the most current events in terms of the timeline. This is the stuff that just happened. We don't know what happens after this. And we won't for a little while, because the next game is believed to be Divinity Fallen Heroes, which takes place between Original Sin 2 and Divinity 2. So it's still, which it would appear that game is going to fill in some potholes, hopefully, between the two games, because as I mentioned in my series timeline video, there are quite a few of them. So, that said, this is the most current events. I love the Flames of Vengeance expansion because it actually kind of marks, for me, where Larian Studios kind of really leaned into the RPG aspect of things since Divine Divinity. Divine Divinity was actually a lot, like there were a lot of choices and stuff in Divine Divinity. And then Beyond Divinity and the main portion of Divinity 2 were actually a little meh in comparison to Divine Divinity. But Flames of Vengeance, it's like there are choices, there are ways around things. You don't have to do everything in one way. You don't have to do them at all in some cases. And I just really enjoyed that personally, and I thought Flames of Vengeance was a great turning point in the studio, personally. Now, after this, our next game up to cover is Dragon Commander, which takes another complete genre twist, so enjoy that. There's like a real-time strategy portion of that game. It's gonna get weird. But there you go, guys. This is the story of Divinity 2. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. But thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.